The emergency lights flashed red across the vast chamber of the Galactic Council. Tejo stood alone in the observation deck, watching as representatives from 47 different species rushed to their seats. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped the railing. He was the only human present, and something terrible had happened. Ambassador Krelvath of the Vosani Empire spoke first, his 6 arms gesturing wildly at the holographic display floating above the chamber floor. The display showed a map of the galaxy, and across it, thousands of red dots were blinking. Each dot represented a human colony, a space station, or a ship. All of them had gone silent at exactly the same moment 3 days ago. 847 worlds, Krelvath said, his voice booming through the chamber. 12,000 orbital stations. Countless vessels in transit. All of them dark. All of them empty. This is unprecedented in galactic history. Speaker Threndix, the elderly Quellan who had led the council for 60 years, raised one of his crystalline appendages for silence. His voice was calm but firm. We must not panic. We will investigate this systematically. Ambassador Tejo, do you have any information that could help us understand what has happened to your people? Tejo walked slowly down to the chamber floor. Every eye in the room followed him. Some species present had been allies of humanity. Others had been suspicious of human expansion and ambition. Now they all wanted answers he wasn't sure he could give. I don't know, Tejo said honestly. I was here attending the trade summit when it happened. I've tried to contact Earth, Mars, every human settlement I can think of. There's no response. But the communication systems are still working. The signals just reach empty space. A Telmari scientist named Vorn stood up. His species was known for their analytical minds and careful approach to problems. We sent 3 scout ships to the nearest human colony, Proxima Haven. The colony is intact. Buildings stand undamaged. Power systems run normally. Food was left on tables still warm. But there are no bodies. No signs of violence. No indication of where the humans went. The chamber erupted in confused chatter. Species spoke in dozens of different languages, their voices mixing into a cacophony of fear and speculation. Threndix called for order again. Could this be an attack? Asked General Cross of the Drakmar swarm. Some weapon we don't understand? There's no evidence of weapons, Vorn replied. No energy signatures, no chemical traces, no spatial distortions. It's as if 300 billion humans simply chose to stop existing at the same instant. Tejo felt sick. He had family on Earth. His sister Haywan was an archaeologist working on a dig site on Belera, a world far from the main human territories. His cousin Hyunsik commanded a defense platform in the Outer Rim. Were they gone too? He hadn't been able to reach either of them. Over the next week, more reports came in. Every exploration team sent to human space found the same thing. Empty homes with dishes in the sink. Ships floating in space with engines still running. Research stations with experiments still in progress. But no people. Then they found the messages. A Quellan exploration team on Earth discovered the first one in the Capitol building in Seoul. It was a holographic recording, activated by motion sensors. The hologram showed an elderly human woman speaking calmly. To our friends in the Galactic Council, the woman said, we want to thank you for the time we shared. We have learned much from you, and we hope we have given something valuable in return. But we have outgrown this space. We must move on to the next stage of our existence. Please do not search for us. We leave you our gifts. Use them well. Similar messages were found across every human world. Some were written notes. Others were audio recordings. A few were elaborate data packets. But they all said essentially the same thing. Humanity had left voluntarily. They were gone. And they had left something behind. Tejo watched as the council struggled to understand. The Vosani wanted to claim human territories. The Quellans argued for preserving human worlds as historical sites. The Telmari wanted to study every piece of human technology they could find. Arguments broke out daily, but something else was happening that worried Tejo more. On the fringes of known space, his cousin Hyunsik had been found alive. He had been in cryosleep for medical treatment when the departure happened. The military ship that found him brought him to the council station. When Tejo met him, Hyunsik looked like a broken man. They left me behind, Hyunsik said, staring at nothing. Everyone I knew, everyone I loved. They went somewhere and I wasn't good enough to go with them. That's not true, Tejo said, though he didn't fully believe his own words. You were asleep. They couldn't wake you. Or they chose not to, Hyun-sik replied bitterly. Another human was found a week later. Bora had been a deep space engineer, working alone on a remote satellite relay when the departure occurred. A Vosani patrol picked up her distress signal. She was brought to the council station, where she immediately requested access to human data archives. Bora was different from Hyun-sik. She wasn't grief-stricken or angry. She seemed focused, almost driven. When Taeho asked her if she knew what had happened, she looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "I have theories," she said carefully, "but I need to verify them first. The council needs to look at what humanity left behind. Really look at it. This wasn't random. This was planned." That night Taeho couldn't sleep. He stood in his quarters looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there his entire species had vanished. Had they died? Had they transcended somehow? Were they watching him right now from some higher plane of existence? He remembered something his grandmother had told him when he was a child. She had lived through the early days of human space exploration, when Earth was still recovering from wars and environmental collapse. "Humans are survivors," she had said. "We adapt, we endure, and when we can't do either, we transform." Maybe that's what had happened. Maybe humanity had transformed into something the council couldn't yet understand. And if that was true, then the gifts they left behind might be more important than anyone realized. Taeho made a decision. He would dedicate himself to understanding what humanity had left behind, not for glory or power, but because someone needed to be humanity's voice. Someone needed to help the council understand what his species had been trying to do. The next morning he requested permission to lead an expedition to Earth's deepest archives. Speaker Threndix granted it immediately. As Taeho prepared to leave, Bora approached him. "I want to come with you," she said. "I think I know what we're going to find. And I think it's going to change everything." Taeho nodded. Together they boarded a shuttle bound for Earth. Behind them, the Galactic Council continued its debates and arguments. But Taeho knew that soon, very soon, those arguments would become meaningless. Humanity had left them something extraordinary. He could feel it. The shuttle descended through Earth's atmosphere, passing over cities that stood silent and empty. Taeho pressed his face against the window, looking down at Seoul, the city where he had been born. The buildings still stood tall. The streets were clean. Solar panels on rooftops still collected energy from the sun, but no people walked those streets. No vehicles moved along the roads. It was like looking at a perfectly preserved museum. Bora sat across from him, reviewing data on her tablet. She had been quiet during most of the journey, absorbed in her research. Now, as they approached the landing zone near the National Archives, she finally spoke. "The council thinks humanity just vanished," she said, "but that's not what happened. We prepared for this. We planned it for a very long time." Taeho turned to look at her. "How do you know?" "Because I was part of the preparation," Bora said quietly. "Not the final stage. I didn't know it would happen so soon. But I knew something was coming. Many of us did. We just didn't talk about it openly." The shuttle landed on a platform outside a massive building complex. The Seoul Archives had been built 200 years ago to preserve human history and knowledge. It extended deep underground, with hundreds of levels containing everything from ancient paper books to quantum data storage systems. They walked through empty corridors, their footsteps echoing off the walls. Emergency lighting guided them deeper into the complex. Taeho felt like he was walking through a tomb. Every door they passed could have been his sister's office or his friend's workspace. But everyone was gone. On the 47th sublevel, they found what they were looking for. A massive chamber filled with holographic displays and data terminals. Bora moved to one of the terminals and began typing rapidly. The screens lit up, showing files that Taeho had never seen before. "These are the real records," Bora explained. "The ones humanity kept private. The council knew our official history. We told them we achieved faster-than-light travel 400 years ago. We told them we were newcomers to galactic civilization." She paused, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "We lied." The holographic display changed, showing star maps and timelines. Taeho stared in disbelief. According to these records, humanity had been traveling to the stars for over 3,000 years. They had encountered dozens of alien species, most of them extinct. They had explored half the galaxy before they ever made contact with the Galactic Council. "Why hide this?" Taeho asked. "Because we learned from what we found," Bora said. She pulled up another file. It showed images of dead worlds, ruined cities, and extinct civilizations. Every species we discovered had reached a certain level of advancement and then died out. Some destroyed themselves in wars, others were killed by environmental collapse. But most of them simply vanished, just like we did. We studied them. We learned their mistakes, and we discovered something terrifying. She showed him a graph. It displayed a timeline stretching back millions of years. Every 50,000 years, there was a spike in civilizations disappearing. It was a pattern regular and undeniable. The great filter, Bora said. Every intelligent species reaches a point where they either transcend physical existence or they die. There's no middle ground. We had to choose. While Tejo absorbed this information, other discoveries were being made across the galaxy. On the research colony of Kairos Prime, a Telmari team led by Chief Scientist Vorn had found something extraordinary. Deep beneath the surface of the colony, in laboratories that humans had sealed before leaving, they discovered technologies that shouldn't exist. Vorn examined a fusion reactor the size of a small car. According to his instruments, it was producing enough clean energy to power an entire planet. The efficiency was 99.7%. His own species had been trying to break 70% efficiency for 2 centuries. "This is impossible," Vorn whispered. "The mathematics don't work? The materials shouldn't be able to withstand these temperatures." His assistant, a young Telmari named Kess, pointed to a nearby workstation. "There are blueprints here. Complete instructions for building these reactors. And look at this." She pulled up another file. "Medical scanners that can detect and cure any known disease. Quantum computers that can predict stellar movements millennia in advance. They left us everything." Similar discoveries were happening on every human world. The Quellan philosopher Nethris was exploring a research facility on Mars, when she found something that made her question everything she thought she knew about humanity. It was a simple stone tablet, carefully preserved in a climate-controlled vault. The writing on it was in Quellan script, but it was over 10,000 years old. Humans had visited the Quellan homeworld long before the Quellans achieved spaceflight. They had observed, studied, and left without making contact. They had done the same with dozens of species. They had been watching the galaxy for millennia, learning from everyone, preparing for their own evolution. Back on Earth, Tejo was reading through files with growing amazement. Humanity hadn't just been preparing to leave. They had been preparing to help everyone else ascend too. Every piece of technology they left behind was a stepping stone. Every discovery was carefully designed to push other species forward without creating dependency. "We wanted to leave the galaxy better than we found it," Bora said. "That was always the plan. We couldn't take everyone with us. The ascension requires a level of consciousness that each species has to achieve on their own, but we could make the path easier." A new file opened and Tejo saw his sister's face. Heywan had recorded a message before she left. He played it with shaking hands. "Tejo," his sister's voice said from the recording, "if you're seeing this, it means you were left behind. I'm sorry. We tried to reach everyone, but some people were too far away or unable to respond. This isn't a punishment. This is a gift. You and the others who remain have a purpose. You're the witnesses. You're the teachers. Help the council understand what we've done. Help them see that this isn't an ending. It's a beginning." Tears ran down Tejo's face. His sister was gone, but she had believed he would be important. She had trusted him with this responsibility. More humans began to emerge from isolation. A scientist named Yun-hee was found on a remote research station. She had been studying deep space phenomena when the departure occurred. Unlike Hyunsik, who was consumed by grief, Yun-hee was excited. She had been part of the Ascension project and had volunteered to stay behind. Someone had to remain to explain. Yun-hee told the council in a broadcast that was sent to every member species. "Humanity didn't abandon you. We're not your enemies. We're your guides. Everything we learned, everything we achieved, we're sharing with you, but you have to be ready to receive it." She revealed the existence of data vaults hidden on every human world. Each vault contained complete scientific knowledge, philosophical frameworks, and historical records. It was an education system designed for an entire galaxy. The council was overwhelmed. Some species celebrated. The Quellans saw it as the greatest gift ever given by one civilization to another, but others were suspicious. The Vasani Empire worried about hidden dangers in the technology. The Drakmar swarm believed humans were trying to control them from beyond. Speaker Threndix called for patience. "We must study these gifts carefully," he said. "We must understand what humanity has given us before we decide how to use it." But in the darkest corners of space, on the edge of Council territory, Hyun-Sik sat alone in his quarters and wondered why he hadn't been good enough to ascend with his people. He looked at the stars and felt only emptiness. Bo-Ra's words about purpose and gifts meant nothing to him. He was a soldier, and now he had no war to fight. He was a human, and now he had no humanity to protect. The gifts were being revealed, but their true purpose was still hidden, and the greatest revelation was yet to come. 6 months had passed since humanity's departure. The Galactic Council had changed in ways no one could have predicted. Scientists from every member species worked together in former human laboratories, trying to understand the technologies that had been left behind. Philosophers debated the meaning of humanity's final messages, and slowly, carefully, the truth began to emerge. Taeho stood before the full council assembly, preparing to share what he and Bo-Ra had discovered. The chamber was packed. Representatives from species that rarely attended council sessions had come to hear what he had to say. Even the isolationist Wraith Collective had sent observers. "We know why humanity left," Taeho began. His voice was steady now, though his heart raced. "They discovered the Great Filter, the reason our galaxy is filled with ruins but so few living civilizations." He activated the holographic display. It showed the same graph Bo-Ra had shown him months ago, the pattern of extinction stretching back millions of years. "Every 50,000 years something happens," Taeho continued. "A cosmic event that we don't fully understand yet. It forces every intelligent species to make a choice. Either they transcend physical reality and ascend to a higher dimension, or they're destroyed. There is no middle path, no way to hide, no way to fight it." The chamber erupted in disbelief. Species shouted in their own languages. Some demanded proof. Others called Taeho a liar or a fool. But Speaker Threndix raised his appendages for silence. "Can you prove this claim?" Threndix asked calmly. Bo-Ra stepped forward. She had been working with Yun-Hee and other remaining humans to compile evidence. "Yes, we have astronomical data going back millions of years. We have archaeological evidence from 32 extinct civilizations, and we have humanity's own calculations. The next event is coming in approximately 900 years. 900 years. To some species, that seemed like plenty of time. To others, it was barely enough, but all of them understood the implications. They would face the same choice humanity had faced. Humanity spent 2,000 years preparing for their ascension, Taeho said. They studied every extinct civilization. They learned from their failures, and they succeeded. But they didn't want to leave the rest of us to face this challenge alone. Yun-Hee joined them on the chamber floor. She was the most knowledgeable of the remaining humans, and she had been waiting for this moment. "Humanity left you more than technology," she said. "We left you a path, a way to ascend just as we did." She pulled up new data on the holographic display. It showed locations scattered across the galaxy. Hundreds of them. Each one was marked with human symbols. "These are ascension gates," Yun-Hee explained. "Massive structures hidden throughout the galaxy. Humanity built them over the course of 1,000 years. Each one is capable of transporting an entire species to the higher dimensions where humanity now exists." The chamber fell silent. Even the skeptics were too shocked to speak. The implications were staggering. Humanity hadn't just saved themselves. They had built escape routes for everyone. "But there's a condition," Yun-Hee continued. Her voice became serious. "The gates only work for species that have achieved true unity. No internal conflicts. No wars between factions. A civilization must be completely at peace with itself and acting as one consciousness before the gate will respond. This isn't a technological limitation. It's a fundamental requirement for ascension." General Cross of the Drakmar Swarm stood up. His species was known for their aggressive nature and competitive internal politics. "So humanity has given us a gift we can't use. What good is a door if we don't have the key?" "Humanity also left you instructions for achieving unity," Bo-Ra said. She pulled up another set of files. "Philosophical frameworks, meditation techniques, social structures, political systems, educational methods. Everything they learned about bringing a divided species together. It's all there in the data vaults, free for anyone to study and implement." The council debated for hours. Some species saw humanity's gift as genuine altruism. Others saw it as manipulation or control. The Vosani representative argued that humanity was trying to force everyone to adopt human values. The Quellan representative countered that humanity was simply sharing wisdom they had earned through centuries of effort. While the council argued, something was happening in a distant part of the galaxy. On a world called Balara, HFY had survived the departure. She had been deep underground in an archaeological dig when it happened, too far from any communication systems to receive the call to ascend. When she emerged 3 days later, she found herself alone. But HFY was an archaeologist. She understood the value of preservation and teaching. She spent months cataloging everything humans had left on Balara. Then she began traveling, visiting council worlds and sharing humanity's message directly with ordinary citizens rather than politicians. Your leaders are afraid, HFY told a gathering of young Quellans in their capital city. They're afraid of change. They're afraid of losing power. But humanity's gift isn't about power. It's about evolution. It's about becoming something greater than you are. Her words spread across the galactic networks. Videos of her speeches were shared billions of times. A human woman, alone but not defeated, traveling the galaxy to teach anyone who would listen, she became a symbol of hope. Meanwhile, on a military station near Vosani space, Hyun-sik watched these videos with mixed emotions. He was proud of HFY's courage, but he still felt abandoned. He had dedicated his life to protecting humanity, and they had left without him. What was his purpose now? A Vosani officer named Krell approached him. Your cousin spreads dangerous ideas, Krell said. She tells people to abandon their governments and pursue unity. This could destroy the established order. Maybe the established order needs to be destroyed. Hyun-sik replied quietly. Back on Mars, Vorn and his team of Telmari scientists made a breakthrough. They had been studying the ascension gates, trying to understand how they worked. What they discovered changed everything. The gates don't just transport matter, Vorn reported to the council. They fundamentally alter consciousness. When a unified species passes through, they don't just move to a higher dimension. They become something new, something we don't have words for. And according to humanity's notes, this transformation is permanent and irreversible. This revelation caused new debates. Some species saw it as transcendence. Others saw it as death. What would they become if they ascended? Would they still be themselves? Would they remember who they had been? Nethris, the Quellan philosopher, spent weeks meditating on these questions. Finally, she published a treatise that became famous across the galaxy. In it, she argued that ascension wasn't about losing yourself. It was about finding your true self, free from the limitations of physical existence. Humanity didn't die, Nethris wrote. They were reborn, and they left us the same opportunity. We should be grateful, not afraid. Her words inspired millions. Small groups began forming on various worlds, dedicated to achieving the unity necessary for ascension. They called themselves unity circles. They practiced the meditation techniques humanity had left behind. They studied human philosophy and tried to apply it to their own cultures. But not everyone was inspired. The Drakmar swarm saw the unity circles as a threat to their traditional warrior culture. A radical faction within the swarm began planning something dangerous. If they couldn't achieve unity through peace, perhaps they could seize an ascension gate by force and study it. Perhaps they could unlock its secrets and use it without meeting humanity's conditions. Taeho learned of this plan through intelligence contacts. He immediately traveled to the swarm's territory to try to stop them. But he was one human against an entire military faction. He needed help. He found it in an unexpected place. Hyun-sik, tired of feeling useless, volunteered to join him. I couldn't protect humanity, Hyun-sik said. But maybe I can protect humanity's legacy. Together they raced toward the ascension gate the Drakmar faction was targeting. They had no weapons, no army, just the hope that they could somehow prevent a catastrophe that could doom the entire galaxy's chance at salvation. The ascension gate hung in space like a massive ring of crystalline metal. It was 3 kilometers in diameter, covered in patterns that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. The gate had been hidden for centuries by human technology, but the Drakmar swarm had found it. Now a fleet of warships surrounded it. Taeho and Hyun-sik arrived in a small diplomatic shuttle. They had no authority to stop a military operation. They had no weapons that could threaten warships. But they had something more important. They had the truth. Drakmar Fleet, this is Ambassador Taeho of the Galactic Council. Taeho broadcast on all frequencies. You must stop this operation immediately. The Ascension Gate cannot be weaponized or studied through force. Please listen to what I have to say, Commander Vresh of the Drakmar fleet responded. His voice was filled with contempt. You are not our commander, human. We do not need your permission to explore technology that was left in our territory. Stand aside. This gate isn't in anyone's territory, Hyunsik cut in. It belongs to the future. To all of us. Don't do this. But the Drakmar ships moved forward. They launched drones toward the gate, planning to scan it and eventually transport it back to their home system for study. The drones reached the gate's surface and began their work. Then everything changed. The gate activated. Light poured from its center, brilliant and pure. The Drakmar drones disintegrated instantly, not destroyed but simply unmade. The warships tried to retreat, but an energy field expanded from the gate, holding them in place, not harming them but preventing them from moving. A voice filled the void of space. It spoke in every language simultaneously, directly into the minds of everyone present. Teho recognized it immediately. It was humanity's collective consciousness speaking from the higher dimensions. Violence cannot breach this threshold, the voice said. It wasn't angry or judgmental. It was simply stating a fact. The gates respond only to unified consciousness approaching with peaceful intent. Any attempt to study them through force, any attempt to weaponize them will fail. This is not a punishment. This is the nature of ascension. Only peace can pass through these doors. The energy field released the Drakmar ships. Commander Vresh was silent for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its aggression. What are you? We are what you will become if you choose unity, humanity's voice replied. We watch, we wait, we hope, but we cannot force you. The choice must be yours. The voice faded. The gate returned to its dormant state. The Drakmar fleet retreated, shaken by what they had experienced. Teho and Hyunsik floated in their small shuttle, equally amazed. Humanity wasn't gone. They were still watching, still protecting the gates, still hoping that others would follow. News of what happened at the gate spread across the galaxy within hours. The incident changed everything. Species that had been skeptical about humanity's intentions now understood. The gates weren't tools or weapons. They were something sacred, something that required fundamental change to access. The council convened an emergency session. Speaker Threndix looked older than ever, but his voice was strong. We have been given proof of humanity's sincerity, he said. Now we must decide what to do with their gift. Do we pursue ascension? Do we seek unity? Or do we continue as we are, knowing that in 900 years we face extinction? The debates that followed were intense but different from before. Species weren't arguing about whether humanity's gift was real. They were arguing about whether they could achieve the unity necessary to use it. The Vosani Empire faced internal struggles. Different factions wanted different things. Some wanted to pursue ascension. Others wanted to maintain their current power structures. The empire began to fracture. The Quellan people, guided by Nethris and her followers, began making real progress toward unity. Their entire society reorganized around the goal of peaceful consciousness. They abandoned competitive politics and embraced collective decision-making. It would take time, but they were moving in the right direction. Smaller species, ones without vast empires or complex political systems, found unity easier to achieve. A species called the Pelthara, only 50 million strong, dedicated themselves completely to the path humanity had laid out. They studied the philosophical frameworks. They practiced the meditation techniques. They learned to think as one. Hei-Wan continued her travels, but now she had company. Other remaining humans joined her. They formed a group called the Witnesses, dedicated to helping any species that wanted to pursue ascension. They traveled to dozens of worlds, teaching and guiding. On a small moon orbiting a gas giant, Hei-Wan met with a group of young Telmari who had formed a unity circle. They asked her questions for hours. How did humanity achieve unity? What sacrifices did they make? Was it worth giving up individual ambition for collective consciousness? Humanity didn't give up individuality, Hei-Wan explained. We learned that true individuality exists within unity. When you're part of a unified consciousness, you don't lose yourself. You find yourself in everyone else. Your joys are multiplied. Your pains are shared and healed. You become more than you were, not less. A young Telmari named Jess asked, but what about conflict? What about disagreement? Don't those things make us stronger? Conflict within a species makes you weak, Hei-Wan replied. Diversity of thought within unity makes you strong. You can have different ideas, different perspectives, different dreams, but you must all work together toward common goals. That's the difference. While the witnesses taught, Bora worked on something else. She had discovered additional information in humanity's archives. It wasn't just about ascending. It was about what came after. The higher dimensions weren't an ending. They were a beginning, a doorway to something even greater. She shared this information with the council. Humanity is waiting for us, she said, but they're also preparing for what comes next. The 50,000-year cycle isn't the ultimate challenge. It's just one step in an infinite journey. If we ascend, we join humanity in facing whatever comes beyond. This revelation gave new meaning to everything. Ascension wasn't an escape. It was an acceptance of responsibility for the universe itself. Hyunsik, who had been bitter and angry for so long, finally found peace. He realized that being left behind wasn't a punishment or a mistake. It was a choice humanity had made carefully. Some people needed to stay to guide the others. Some people needed to be the bridge between physical existence and whatever came next. He approached Taeho one evening as they sat together watching Earth's sunset. No one had lived on Earth for a year now, but the planet remained beautiful. Nature was reclaiming the cities, but slowly, gently. I understand now, Hyunsik said, why we were left behind. We're not the forgotten ones. We're the chosen ones. Chosen to help others find the path, Taeho nodded. That's what my sister believed. That's what all of them believed. They trusted us to finish what they started. Around the galaxy, change was accelerating. The unity circles grew larger. Entire cities, then entire planets, began coordinating their efforts toward unified consciousness. Not everyone participated. Many species and individuals rejected the path, choosing instead to continue their traditional ways. But enough were trying that progress was visible. The Pelthera, the small species that had dedicated themselves completely to the goal, announced they were ready. Only 20 years had passed since humanity's departure, but the Pelthera claimed they had achieved the necessary unity. They requested that the council witness their attempt to use an ascension gate. The council agreed. Representatives from every member species traveled to the Pelthera home system. Taeho and the other remaining humans came as well. They all gathered in orbit, watching as the entire Pelthera species approached the gate. 50 million individuals moving together. 50 million minds thinking as one. They reached the gate. They touched it and they passed through. The gate flared with brilliant light. The Pelthera vanished, not destroyed, not transported to another location. Transcended. Gone to the higher dimensions where humanity waited. The council watched in stunned silence. Then slowly applause began. Species that had been skeptical now believed. It was possible. Unity could be achieved. Ascension was real. 50 years had passed since humanity's departure. The galaxy had transformed in ways that would have seemed impossible before. Wars had not ended completely, but they were rare and brief. Species that had been enemies for centuries now worked together toward common goals. The ascension had become the defining purpose of galactic civilization. The Quellans were ready. After decades of patient work, their entire species had achieved the unity necessary to pass through the gate. Speaker Threndix, now incredibly ancient even by Quellan standards, stood before his people as they gathered for the final journey. Taeho was there to witness it. He had aged as well, his hair now completely gray, his face lined with time. But his eyes were clear and his purpose unwavering. He had spent half a century helping guide species toward this moment. Now he would watch it happen. Humanity showed us the path, Threndix said. His voice transmitted to every Quellan in the galaxy. They left us a gift beyond measure. Not the technology, though that was valuable. Not the gates, though those are wondrous. The true gift was hope. Hope that we could be better than we were. Hope that evolution doesn't have to end in extinction. Hope that the universe is more vast and beautiful than we ever imagined. 30 billion Quellans moved as one toward the Ascension Gate in their home system. They had left their worlds intact, just as humanity had done. They had preserved their history and knowledge for other species to learn from. They had given their own gifts to those who would follow. The gate activated. Light filled the void. The Quellans passed through and vanished into the higher dimensions. The galaxy had lost another ancient species, but it had also witnessed proof that unity was achievable even for large, diverse civilizations. Within a decade, 6 more species followed. The Telmari went next. their scientific curiosity finally satisfied by the ultimate experiment. Then came the Wraith Collective, who had been silent observers for so long. One by one, species achieved unity and ascended. The galaxy changed. Worlds that had been crowded were now empty. Space stations floated abandoned. But everywhere, the ascended species had left gifts just as humanity had done. Technology, knowledge, philosophy, art. Each species added to the growing library of galactic wisdom. The unity circles evolved into something greater. They became the dominant form of civilization. Instead of nations competing for resources, entire planets worked together toward ascension. The Galactic Council transformed from a political body into something more like a spiritual gathering. Representatives met not to argue and compete, but to share progress and encourage each other. But not everyone pursued ascension. The Vosani Empire split into factions. Some Vosani sought unity and prepared to ascend. Others rejected the path entirely, choosing to maintain their traditional warrior culture. They built their own civilization in the outer reaches of the galaxy, away from the unity circles. That's their right, Haywan said when asked about the Vosani separatists. She was elderly now, having spent her entire life traveling and teaching. Humanity never intended to force anyone. The gate will be there when they're ready, even if that takes 10,000 years. Young species that hadn't achieved spaceflight when humanity departed were now joining the galactic community. They arrived to find a galaxy transformed. Instead of conflict and competition, they found cooperation and hope. Instead of military threats, they found teachers willing to share everything. A young species called the Nari achieved spaceflight and made contact with the Council. They were welcomed warmly and given access to all the accumulated knowledge of the ascended species. A girl named Jiwoo, barely 20 years old, stood in Earth's archives reading humanity's final messages. We were never special, humanity's last recording said. We were simply the first to remember that we don't have to be alone. The universe is vast and cold, but it doesn't have to be empty. We'll be watching from beyond, proud of every species that chooses unity over division, hope over fear. We'll be waiting. Come join us when you're ready. The cosmos is so much bigger than you can imagine, and it's wonderful up here. Jiwoo wept as she read those words. Her species was young, still struggling with conflicts and divisions. But humanity's message gave her hope that someday, her people could achieve unity and join the ascended. Tai Ho spent his final years on Earth. He was the last of the original witnesses. Haewon had passed away peacefully 5 years earlier. Hyunsik had died in an accident while helping construct educational facilities on a Unity Circle world. Bora and Yoonhee had lived long lives, but they too were gone now. He was alone but not lonely. Every day, representatives from species pursuing unity came to visit him. They asked questions. They sought guidance. They thanked him for keeping humanity's message alive. I didn't do anything special, Taeho always told them. I just remembered what my sister taught me, that love and hope are more powerful than fear and division. On his deathbed, surrounded by friends from a dozen different species, Taeho recorded his own final message. He knew it would be played at ascension ceremonies for centuries to come. Humanity didn't leave because we were better, he said, his voice weak but clear. We left because we learned from everyone who came before us. We studied the extinct civilizations and understood their mistakes. We listened to other species and incorporated their wisdom. We became great not through conquest or domination, but through humility and cooperation. He paused, gathering his strength. Now I'm going to join them. I feel the gate calling to me, even though I'm not part of a unified species consciousness. Perhaps humanity will make an exception for an old man who kept their faith. He smiled. Or perhaps I achieved my own form of unity by dedicating my life to serving all species equally. Taeho died that night. His body was cremated and his ashes scattered on Earth, among the ruins of Seoul where he had been born. But 3 days later, something miraculous happened. Ships from every Unity Circle species in the galaxy came to Earth. Billions of individuals from hundreds of species gathered in orbit. They formed a massive consciousness, united by their gratitude to humanity and to Taeho. Together they approached an ascension gate, and they felt something, a presence from beyond welcoming them. They heard voices, humanity's collective consciousness speaking to them from the higher dimensions. Thank you, humanity said. Thank you for remembering. Thank you for trying. Thank you for proving that our faith in you was justified. The species gathered there didn't ascend that day. They weren't fully ready yet. But they had touched the other side. They had felt the connection. And they knew with absolute certainty that when they were ready, humanity would be waiting to welcome them. 300 years after humanity's departure, the transformation was complete. Every major species in the galaxy had either ascended or was actively pursuing unity. The few species that chose different paths were respected and left in peace. The galaxy had become a place of hope rather than fear. The last of the council species to ascend were the Nari. Jiwoo, now an old woman herself, led her people through the gate. As she passed through the threshold, she felt the presence of countless beings. Humanity was there, along with the Quellans, the Telmari, the Pelthara, and dozens of others. "Welcome," humanity's voice said. "Welcome to the beginning of everything." The physical galaxy fell silent. Empty cities stood as monuments to the species that had once lived there. Automated systems maintained them, preserving them for any new species that might emerge and begin their own journey toward ascension. But in the higher dimensions, the galaxy was more alive than ever. Trillions of beings from hundreds of species existed together in harmony. They had transcended physical limitations, but they hadn't lost their identities or their cultures. They had simply expanded them, integrated them, unified them into something greater. And they waited. Waited for the next cycle. Waited for new species to emerge and face the choice between ascension and extinction. When that time came, they would be ready. They would leave their own gifts, their own guidance, their own messages of hope, because they had learned what humanity taught them, that the greatest legacy isn't power or territory or technology. The greatest legacy is preparing the path for those who follow. The greatest gift is proving that survival doesn't have to mean fighting alone. The council stood in awe, forever changed by the species that departed not in conquest, but in love. And in the higher dimensions, humanity smiled at what they had helped create. The universe was vast and infinite, but it was no longer empty. It was filled with unity, hope, and endless possibility. The story of humanity's departure had become legend, but more importantly, it had become a roadmap, a promise, a proof that evolution could continue without violence, that civilizations could transcend without forgetting their origins, and that the cosmos itself was waiting to welcome all who chose the path of unity. The galaxy would never forget. And in the dimensions beyond space and time, humanity would never stop watching, hoping, and waiting for others to join them in the infinite dance of consciousness that stretched beyond the stars themselves.